Welcome to the Impact Talks podcast. Today we're talking to Jakob Møllemose, who's joining us today. Jakob's been doing fundraising for the last 20 years. And this January, he just started this new community that he wants to spread out through the fundraising community. Jakob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Very short. Yeah, I've been working with fundraising for approximately 20 years. Done a multitude of things, and it's everything from campaign and strategy development into telephone fundraising, face-to-face, digital campaigns, and all there is around it.
And what made you start this community?
Well, it comes back to my experience as a public speaker in different fundraising conferences all over Europe. I looked back last year and looked at all the program sheets, who were the speakers, what were the sessions all about, and I couldn't find anything that really went in depth on telephone fundraising. And my first job was actually setting up a company that did face-to-face and telephone fundraising, and when we started, we had to invent everything from scratch, and that's what Impact Talk is really about, is how can we raise more money by using best practice instead of having to invent everything by ourselves.
Yes, and getting all these different characters from all around Europe to work together.
Yes, absolutely. Because I love the conference scene and I love the ability to work across different organizations. The charity sector is really low on investments, but one of our key competitive advantages, actually, we are very willing to share because it's all about positive social change. And if we're able to help our neighbor be better at what they do, we'll change the world faster. So it's how can you bring a lot of people who are passionate or people who are really new to telephone fundraising together to learn what is best practice and raise more funds for the charity.
Yes, and you already had one event here in January.
Yeah.
You had one speaker named Holger.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, I'll tell you. It's Holger Menze, and he's from Germany, lives in Berlin. And I've known him for a lot of years, and it was really, first of all, having the first event, that was like a big breakthrough for us. Really happy to have this baby come alive, and we had a lot of speakers who were really supportive of making it happen. And Holger has been part of the process the last 6 months, and he did a session about the basics in telephone fundraising. What should you actually be doing if you're not doing it today? And then he showed also the perspective on what can you actually do on the more long-term run, and that would be, for example, legacy fundraising. How can you use a telephone to make that better? But the key essence, I think, that Holger was talking about was coming back to having really good conversations with people. And you see this over and over again in telephone fundraising. It's like a split. You have the ones where it's the sausage factory, where it's just about having as many conversations, asking many people as possible, and maybe applying a little bit of pressure to get them convinced that it's a good thing to support the charity. On the other side, you have the ones who have the long-term perspective on relationship building that Ken Burnett introduced many years ago. And that's what Holger tries to tap into. How can we make really good conversations with donors so they not only give a little bit extra, but they become more engaged and happy about the work that the charity does.
And did he give some tips into how to engage people in conversations like that?
Yeah, he gave both tips and some of the basics. And of course, it revolves around both acquisition, retention, and monetization on your donor database and the people you have relationships with. His key essence is be very aware about what's happening in your database. Understand it. Take the time to find out what are the type of people there, what do they want to support, and then start testing the basic concepts like the upgrade, the conversion from one-off givers to regular givers, and all these things. And one thing that splits again the community around telephone fundraising is, should we do loyalty calls, the thank you calls, the updates, and all these things. And any other channel you work with, you send updates. In email, you send an email once in a while, just say how things are going, not asking for money all the time. You should be doing the same when you are building relationship and talking with people. And I think one thing that I liked about what Holger was saying is, can you ensure that you have the same people calling again and again, so it also becomes a personal relationship that builds over time. So those were the elements that he went through in his 20-minute talk. And then we had 10 minutes of question and answer afterwards with all the participants who were present on the online event.
Yeah, that's very interesting. This also goes in line with one of the speakers we're going to talk about in a later episode, making sure that the employees actually stay in the same place for many years.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about that in a later episode.
Yeah, that's going back to the good old sausage factory is if everybody in the sector is very aware of churn, how many people leave the organization and don't come back and don't support it. And I think if you're running a telephone campaign in-house or with an outside supplier outsourcing it, you should be really aware of what's the churn on the employees in the organization. And we'll get back to that, but it shows quality, because if people are leaving, donors or people doing the telephone fundraising, you're probably not doing a very good job.
So when Holger spoke at the last event, how did the Q&A go?
So a few questions came up on especially legacy fundraising, because I think it's one of the big trends, especially in Europe. How can you move that into your call center as well? But to do that, you need really good callers, because you don't want a very inexperienced person who just babbles around. Yeah, you want somebody who have genuine conversations. And one of the points that came out there was, how can you use previous conversations for future conversations? And we actually have a session on our next event about how can you use AI for that as well. One of the very sexy topics, AI. But he was, how can you store that information so when you call them again, you know actually what happened in the previous conversation, so you don't just drop all that information, because it's really valuable.
Okay, so that is one of the points that people can expect to hear about in the next event.
Yeah, it's a guy called David from France. He runs, I think, France's biggest call center. And they've developed an AI model that actually transcribes the whole conversation, and then does quality assurance, making sure that GDPR, that people are introducing themselves properly. So there's like the quality element. But then the AI is also able to go in and extract important information that you then can store for future use. And on the next session is about donor-centered communication, and David will tell us about how they use that information for prepping for conversations to make better conversations happen.
I think we should wrap this episode up.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us here in this podcast, where we talk a lot of interesting subjects around the previous event. We've always have a next event. It's 5 times a year, and there's also a community where you can share and talk with fellow fundraisers talking about telephone fundraising or lifetime value or omni-channel, because what is important is also what happens in between the events. But go to impact-talks.com and you can read about the programs, the themes. You can buy your ticket. You can buy your whole organization a ticket there, and you can sign up as a speaker if you're interested in sharing something. We'll take really good care of you and do the pre-recorded session. So go have a look and please join up. Thank you so much.
Hello,